ACPD, November 12th, sound check one, sound check one. ACPD, sound check two, sound check two.
No. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities meeting on November 12th, 2024. I will now call this meeting of the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities to order. Please note that we have quorum. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. I will now commence the roll call. Please indicate your presence when I call your name. Hope Bonenfant. Singh. Benjamin Cullimore. Lance Dingman. Here. Here, thank you. Kara Hernold. Right, she's still on, right, I remember. Levi Genosi.
Here.
Thank you. Leif Johansson's going to be late. Pargan Carr. Paula Kilburn. She's waving here. Jake Maurice. Jake is here, thank you. Mark McNeil.
Here.
Tim Murphy. No. Kim Nolan.
Here.
Tim Nolan.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Westbrook. Seeing him. And Councillor Mark Taddison.
Present.
Oh, and Hope just logged on. Perfect. Hello, Hope.
Hello.
Would the staff who are present please introduce themselves with their name and position?
Carrie McIntosh, Legislative Coordinator.
Tamara Bates, Legislative Coordinator.
Rebecca Banke, Project Manager, Community Inclusion and Equity.
Michelle Martin, Manager of Accessible Transportation Service with the Transit Division.
Is there anybody else? Oh, okay. We will have the fire service attending at 5 p.m. Ceremonial activities. Elsie McIntosh will now read the Hamilton Land Acknowledgement.
The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers.
Thank you very much, Elsie McIntosh. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. May I please have a mover and a seconder?
Mr. Chair. Tim
Go
here,
ahead,
if I may.
Go ahead.
Kim and I have to duck out of the meeting early. Is it possible to move the outdoor spaces and work Parklands Working Group at the beginning of the consent items? Just to move it up the agenda, to do it first?
It will go up first on the consent items, and yes, we can do that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so may I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented?
As amended.
As amended. I was wondering.
Mark.
Hope and Mark, perfect. Thanks very much. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, that motion is not going to be up yet. Okay, I don't need to worry about that. Are you okay?
Yep.
Okay. Approval of minutes of the previous meeting, 4.1, October 8, 2024. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes as presented? A mover and a seconder. Hope and Paula. Are there any opposed to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, motion's carried. Thank you. Communications, correspondence from Maureen Cosin Heath, Director, Transit Division, respecting upcoming relevant dates for reports respecting the Hamilton Street Railways, HSR voluntary pay program, and accessibility concerns in the HSR. The recommendation is to receive them. We'll do both of them. 5.2, correspondence from Maureen Cosin Heath, Director, Transit Division, respecting concerns about Presto equipment on board HSR buses. Recommendation to be received. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the communications items?
Mark.
Seconder. Mark and Lance. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the communications items? Not seeing any. Okay. Oh, is that for? Are you having for a comment or? Okay. Kim Tim Nolan, are you up for a comment or just seconding?
No, we were just going to move or second, but that's fine.
Okay.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, then go ahead, Paula. If you can. Not working? Okay. I think we're having some technical problems. All right, so we're gonna move this, I guess, and go forward. Yeah, okay. So are there any opposed to the motion on the floor? I'm seeing none, so receive the communications items. Thank you. Staff presentations, 8.1, accessible transportation services journey mapping to understand the customer experience. Michelle Martin, Manager, Accessible Transportation Services, available to present.
Thanks very much to the committee. Happy to be here today to provide everybody with an update on the customer satisfaction work that Accessible Transportation Services has undertaken. I'll just remind everybody of the roadmap. We gave a longer presentation of the HSR Accessible Transportation Services roadmap to ACPD earlier this year. I'll just take you through it again quickly, but include a little bit of the history of the customer satisfaction work already undertaken by the HSR on the conventional network. So in 2018 to 2020, there was broad engagement of conventional transit customers as part of its review of the entire HSR network with the goal of reconfiguring the conventional network from the ground up to improve HSR services across the city. In 2020, we also had the ATS eligibility process audit and the recommendations therein. The Hamilton Auditor General audited the ATS eligibility process at the request of Council in 2019 due to increasing trip counts. In 2021, ATS presented business cases that we were assisted in making by Dillon Consulting for numerous 2020 audit recommendations, including supporting increased travel options for riders, meaning the right transit service at the right time under the right conditions. Council at that time expressed the wish for ATS to proceed slowly. In 2022, ATS was challenged to undertake its own re-envision project. It was a motion from the council floor for ATS to undertake this work, similar to the HSR re-envision project, in response to the initial report from ATS on the audit response steps planned. In 2022, we had some ATS contractor audits. We had the Auditor General review legacy contractor vehicle safety, the shared ride service provided by DARTS, and ATS oversight of the taxi script program, with recommendations to ensure contingency to the shared ride service and prevent taxi script misuse. In 2023, HSR presented its redesigned network, a conceptual design presented for public engagement, including key transit hub locations. And in 2023, ATS undertook its initial customer satisfaction work. We did a survey of our active customers, seeking to establish an ATS customer panel, and we undertook a journey mapping project. In 2025 and onward, we're looking at a review of service delivery models. We hope to be making some recommendations for service delivery and for conditions of eligibility in 2026 or early 2027. And 2027 and forward, we would like to be piloting integrated transit and look at greater integration of the accessible transportation service with the HSR. So the challenge is to ensure ATS customer experience and satisfaction, that the customer journey is considered and included in the larger roadmap. The history, a bit of a history on ATS, Accessible Transportation Services customer satisfaction work earlier. In 2015, Forum Research was retained by Transit to survey accessible transportation services customers. There was a random sample of 402 out of 6,530 active users of the service. They were interviewed by phone. The researchers reported 95% confidence level in the results. Generally, the result was overall satisfaction with some key areas for improvement. And Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities were concerned in ATS conversations with them later that there were customers who perhaps wanted to participate but were not asked. In 2023, Accessible Transportation Services undertook a broad customer survey. We mailed to 8,360 active users, and we undertook broader communication efforts to reach active customers, and we had an excellent response rate of more than 10%, 965 responses to 50 questions that covered service satisfaction, transportation modes used, demographic questions, and some open-ended opportunities for comment. All questions were reviewed by the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities Transportation Working Group for input, and all questions were made explicitly optional at the request of the working group. So not all respondents responded to every question, but we still have a good level of response for each of the questions. The next slide talks a little bit about the limits of quantitative data, and it includes a sample count of some of the quantitative data. There are mass quantities of quantitative data coming out of this large survey. But this question was question 11, are you satisfied the services provided by ATS, DARTS, and/or the taxi script program are meeting your transportation needs? And the count for each of the response categories is as follows. No response, 169. Very satisfied, 244. Satisfied, 255. Somewhat satisfied, 187. Unsatisfied, 67. And very unsatisfied, 43. So where in a survey, options and answers are kept as streamlined as possible to support quantitative data analysis, meaning counts, detailed customer interviews can give us a richer picture of the customer journey. For example, again, we provided a lot of opportunity for open comment. 37 of the survey questions provided such a space. And the number of comments generated per question ranged from roughly 20 to 250 comments. So we're looking in the range of thousands of comments. They range from detailed paragraphs to 2 words, for example, wait times. So we don't know what that means. Wait times in the call center queue, wait times for your trip, wait times to be able to book a trip. Qualitative analysis for underlying themes can help identify customer pain points anonymously, and this kind of analysis can direct further research, including more specialized surveys or some focus group topics. And ATS is very pleased with the level of response to this large survey and are looking forward to collaboration with McMaster University researchers for both quantitative and qualitative analysis. They have the software tools, they have the expertise to explore possible relationships among each of the indicators measured by the questions. However, detailed customer reviews using a conversational approach can provide much richer detail and give a fuller picture of the customer experience. And this is where the journey mapping project comes in. So ATS engaged Dillon Consulting to add depth through a journey mapping project to visualize the customer journey as a series of steps or touch points. The Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities Transportation Working Group was invited to comment. The final interview script and the list of demographic categories used were sent to the entire committee for review to ensure that their concerns were addressed, specifically that a broad range of experience would be captured, that interviewees were made as comfortable as possible, and that interviewees clearly understood they could decline to answer any question. So the work was done in alignment with HSR guiding principles to better understand the use of accessible transportation services by registered customers, to explore perceptions of integrated service delivery, to support planning for an integrated service pilot. And an integrated service means that part of the journey can be taken on the shared ride service, where you're picked up at the doorstep of your home or your departure point and brought to an accessible transit hub to complete the remainder of your journey on conventional transit, where there are no barriers for you to doing that. So we're focused specifically on HSR guiding principle number 1, customer experience is at the heart of what we do, and guiding principle 2, we honor equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I'm joined today by Zara Jaffer from Dillon Consulting and also Dennis Carr from Dillon Consulting to present to us 5 customer personas developed through this journey mapping exercise. ATS was involved, specifically our supervisor and customer care representatives, to review the demographic categories used and provide input there to assist in recruiting potential participants to cover as many of the listed categories as possible and ensure participant-informed consent was on file prior to providing contact information to the consultants, integrate a trauma-informed approach and care for the psychological safety of participants when we approached people about their willingness to participate in the exercise, and provide the honorarium of $50 Presto Fare Card for participants when they presented signed proof of participation from their interviewer to our fare staff. So now I'll turn the deck over to Zara Jaffer, and I just want to give you a little bit of introduction. Zara is a planner and associate with Dillon Consulting and the technical group strategist leading the company's national community planning and urban design team. And her work as a planner spans the areas of municipal policy, strategic planning, public engagement, environmental assessment, and infrastructure planning, and includes leadership on award-winning municipal engagement programs. She's designed and led multiple large and small community engagement programs across Ontario relating to transit-oriented communities, strategic planning, and long-range planning exercises. And she's joined today by Dennis Carr. And Dennis is a partner at Dillon Consulting, has been in the transit industry for over 24 years, specializes in both transit planning policy and engagement for both conventional and specialized transit services. And he's also an adjunct professor at the School of Urban and Regional Planning at Toronto Metropolitan University and a member of the CUDA Board of Directors. And so now I'll turn it over to Zara.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Am I coming through okay? Can everyone hear me? Great, thank you. So just wanted to walk you through a little bit of the process that we took. We had taken on board a number of suggestions from this committee in the design of the approach that we took and in the development of the personas. And so, as Michelle mentioned, that included the identification and recruitment of participants. We developed a questionnaire that covered both the journey mapping, customer experience components, as well as optional questions around integrated service delivery. We then developed a journey map template, which we shared with the city's team, with Michelle's team, to make sure that it was appropriate to the kind of use that we intended to have in terms of presenting the results of the journey maps. And then as the interviewees were recruited, we conducted the interviews, which came to a total of 13. We also transcribed and then analyzed those interviews in order to inform the development of personas and the journey maps. So out of the 13 interviews, we came out with 5 personas and corresponding journey maps. And we are now at the stage of preparing the summary report and recommendations. So on the next slide, you will see the, sorry, Michelle, could we go back one, please? Thank you. So you'll see a little bit of a breakdown of the participant profile. We had, as mentioned, a total of 13 participants across a range of different kinds of disabilities were represented. We use the language that they use themselves to describe their disability. So those included Down syndrome, developmental delay, autism, kidney disease, limb amputees, spina bifida or other musculoskeletal disorders, epilepsy, glaucoma, environmental sensitivities, and sensory processing sensitivity. There were 2 male and 11 female participants. And on the next slide, you'll see the types of assistances or assistive devices that were represented among the participants, which included some who travel with a caregiver, who use a regular wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, a cane or other walking implement, a walker, and life-saving medication. So we came out with a total of 5 personas, which I'll give a brief overview to. And these personas were developed based on the interview results and the analysis of the individual interviews. The intention was to draw on similar experiences across participants in order to develop common themes and threads, while also making sure that there was anonymity embedded in the personas so that no single participant saw themselves fully reflected in any single persona and that their anonymity and privacy was protected through this process. And so we have 5 personas. The first one is Jean, 60 years old, lives in Ancaster, Hamilton in a bungalow, and has multiple chronic illnesses and sometimes uses a rollator to travel with. Jacoby, who's 45, lives in Bartonville, Hamilton in an accessible apartment, has spina bifida, and uses a customized motorized wheelchair. Third was Maggie, who's 20 years old and lives in Westdale, Hamilton with her sister and their mother, and has a developmental delay as well as cognitive and hearing related disabilities, and uses a wheelchair or a walker. We also have Chelsea, who's 54, lives in Hamilton Center in a house with her daughter and son-in-law, and experiences bone and joint related disorder, chronic pain, and uses a cane or a walking stick for stability. And finally, Ramon, 35 years old, lives in Stony Creek, Hamilton in a house with his mother, is autistic, and has environmental and sensory processing sensitivities as well. So what we're going to present next is each of the individual personas and their journey maps. I'll provide this at a bit of a higher level overview, and then would certainly be happy to take questions and get a little bit deeper. But in the interest of time and making sure we can give you an overview of all the 5, I'll be somewhat high level in terms of the way that we're going to present these. So when we talk about Jean, she, as I mentioned, has multiple chronic illnesses, including kidney disease and glaucoma, and experiences low vision, and has been using ATS often to run errands, as well as to visit medical appointments and family. And so because she is in the subscription service, her rides are scheduled in advance, except when there's a change in schedule or when she has an additional appointment that she needs to book. And she's strongly reliant on the DART service to provide her that independence to get around without relying on others to take her where she needs to go. So in her journey map, you will see a few different elements that we incorporated into the summarizing of all of the data that came through in the interviews. So along the left-hand side, you see emojis that we used to relate the type of primary emotion that was experienced at each of 4 main phases in the journey map process. So those 4 phases are the booking phase, the ride pickup phase, the ride experience phase, and the drop-off phase. So each journey map has emojis along the left side, and then a description of what the participant experience or the persona experience at each phase, and then we used language in words to depict what the emoji is relating. So for each one of these phases, the dominant emotion is also expressed in words. So for Jean, we have in the booking phase, her primary emotion was frustration. As mentioned, that she is a subscription member, but she often does need to schedule additional rides and finds this extremely stressful because availability for the rides that she needs according to her medical appointments are not always available. And she might need to book much earlier than she would ideally prefer. During the ride pickup phase, there's a lot of anxiety as the primary emotion. Although she is tracking her ride online, she does feel a sense of anxiety around when the driver is going to arrive, if they're going to be on time. Once they do arrive, they set up the boarding ramp and help her onto the vehicle, and that process is usually smooth, but the ramps themselves are often steep. So there is an element of anxiety around a fear of falling, a fear of tripping, because of her stability-related components relating to comfort and being able to board the ramp independently. So she often does need help for that, as well as the rides often being scheduled much earlier than she needs. The ride experience phase had a mix of some discomfort, although usually she would be satisfied with that particular component of the journey. And during the ride, the driver stopping to pick up other passengers, making the journey much longer, was contributing to that discomfort. And exhaustion as well, because a lot of customers going to a lot of different places and having a longer journey time, leading to that tiredness. And then finally, in the drop-off phase, generally it was quite smooth, and the dominant emotion being satisfaction. At the end of the ride, Jean would unbuckle her seatbelt and wait for the driver again to set up the ramp and help her to disembark. In Jacoby's case, he moved to Hamilton as a teenager. He's lived in lots of different parts of the city. He works a part-time job, so he uses the accessible transit service to get to work, as well as to attend medical and physiotherapy appointments, to visit family and friends. And similar to Jean, DARTS really is a lifeline for him to be mobile. And so you see in his case, the dominant emotion, again, in the booking phase is that frustration. Generally, during the ride pickup, he's fairly satisfied. It doesn't experience any major kind of discomfort or difficulty with that ride pickup phase. The ride experience phase can be uncomfortable, primarily because some of the vehicles don't have the best shock absorbers, and the ride can be bumpy and uncomfortable, and sometimes long as well if there are other passengers going to different destinations. But the drop-off phase is usually quite smooth, with the dominant emotion being satisfaction. We then go to Maggie, who was born and raised in Hamilton, has a developmental delay since birth, which impacts her balance and mobility. So she uses either a walker or a wheelchair to get around, and often travels with a caregiver, either her mother or her sister, going to art classes at the community center, going to medical appointments, going shopping, and going to other kinds of classes and social events. And she's been using ATS for a couple of years. Often the dizziness and fatigue can be very difficult to deal with, and wanting to be able to travel and do things that she enjoys without being too rushed is really important. So in Maggie's journey map, we see again the frustration experienced not directly by Maggie, but by a caregiver who is calling the call center to request rides, and having that discomfort and the difficulty of often getting disconnected or not getting a call back, and then using the Where is my ride online system to track the vehicle. The ride pickup phase has some anxiety there because of the drivers sometimes being late, and the anxiety of not knowing if they're going to be arriving on time, or even in some cases if they're coming at all, in case the ride gets canceled at the last minute. But once they're actually there, it's usually smooth, with the driver helping her on board, setting up the boarding ramp, and helping her to fasten her seatbelt. The ride experience phase is a mix of discomfort and satisfaction. And so during the ride, particularly when there are other passengers, it's a pleasant experience. Maggie enjoys talking to others. The main issue being the potholes, and again, that comfort around whether the ride is smooth or not. And then at the end, generally a fairly satisfactory element around the drop-off phase. And at the end of the ride, Maggie would unbuckle her seatbelt and wait for help to disembark, and really relying on the drivers to be patient through that process. With Chelsea, who has lived in Hamilton all her life and is recently widowed and is living with her daughter and son-in-law, she uses a cane or a walking stick to help her keep stable, given her joint-related condition and chronic pain. And she uses the accessible transit service to visit the pool at the YMCA, to go shopping, to go to medical appointments, and generally enjoys using the ATS service and interacting with the drivers and other passengers. So in her journey map, we see, again, that similar theme of frustration around the booking phase, and wanting to make sure that she's able to get those rides booked, and expressing a feeling of wanting to be able to take more conventional transit as well, but feeling a bit of that anxiety around balance and pain and uncertainty about whether she would be able to achieve that, and sometimes relying on her daughter to help her with booking. The ride pickup phase, again, that anxiety around not knowing if the ride is coming and being anxious while waiting because rides have been canceled before, and then waiting for a ride with a driver. Once they arrive, usually that component being fairly smooth and the driver helping Chelsea onto the vehicle and paying with her Presto card. Usually experiencing a fair degree of satisfaction during the ride experience phase itself, talking to other passengers and to the drivers, and generally knowing that the drivers are on time, but if the ride is very close to her appointment time or there are a lot of other passengers to drop off, then that can introduce some anxiety. And finally, with the drop-off phase, generally feeling pretty satisfied, finding that the drivers are very helpful and accommodating and making sure that she gets to her destination safely. And finally, we have Ramon, who moved to Hamilton as a child with his mother from the Dominican Republic. He's autistic and even often travels with his mother, who doesn't drive. And so it would either be his mother or another companion or caregiver traveling with him. He has a few environmental sensitivities, particularly to noise and strong smells, and uses the ATS service to go to the day programs at the local community center and to medical appointments. So he is enrolled in the subscription program. His schedule is fairly fixed, although there is the occasional additional ride that is needed to be booked. And so he is currently traveling generally with a caregiver, but looking forward to some more independence, and experiencing during the booking phase a general sense of satisfaction with some of that frustration mixed in. So Ramon is, as I mentioned, enrolled in the subscription program, but whenever there is a change to his schedule, a call center phone call is needed, and waiting for that to get answered, getting dropped off, the queue, all of that can be very frustrating. The ride pickup phase has a mix of some discomfort and satisfaction. So generally, whoever's traveling with Ramon will use the Where's My Ride application to track the vehicle. Generally, the pickup process is quite smooth, but occasionally issues do arise if the driver is new or impatient for some reason, or if another customer is sitting in Ramon's preferred seat. And so because he usually travels with his mother or another caregiver, those issues are usually okay to resolve, and other passengers are generally quite understanding, but sometimes it can lead to a little bit of discomfort and frustration. And then the driver helps Ramon aboard. And so those are the kind of key elements that come through. You see the discomfort and satisfaction mixing through most of his journey, with the drop-off phase generally being satisfactory. So at the end of this, some of our key insights and takeaways from this process. Journey mapping is a tool in the toolbox to consider what Michelle was talking about earlier relating to the pain points, and really centering the experience of the participant throughout is really crucial. The collaboration with yourselves on the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities has been really fundamental to being able to undertake this. And it provides a reflection of the human experience of the service through that deep listening process, and providing the deeper insight that the pure survey format doesn't really allow you to get to. So it complements the survey and other data gathering and research tools, and cannot really be used as a standalone because of its narrow research parameters and how small the sample usually is. So it's to be used mindfully and not as the only source of information on where the pain points are and what the possible resolutions might be. We'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do believe we have a speakers list already. Mark.
Hi. With this research tool, do you not find that the system or the methodology leans heavily towards a satisfaction bias? So it's tilted towards satisfaction rather than meaningful input?
Through you, Chair. So the terminology that we're using around satisfaction, discomfort, frustration, etc., are simple sort of language tags in order to try to summarize the overall feeling. But those were not terms necessarily that we were using in the interview itself to try to prompt people. So the way the interview itself was laid out was intended to be value neutral. We weren't asking people how satisfied did you feel or anything like that. We simply asked them, what was your experience? How did you feel? What happened when you were getting picked up? That type of thing. So the language around satisfaction was not part of the interview at all. We're using it as part of the journey map to try to unearth some of those common themes and common reflections on emotions. And so often the participants themselves would use words like satisfied, very well, comfortable, etc. So the way the journey maps are presented is reflecting the language that the participants themselves used, but we were very careful in the interview itself to try to not introduce that bias and make sure that we aren't prompting participants or asking them questions in a way that suggested that they needed to give us a level of satisfaction or that we were trying to suggest that they were typically satisfied in any way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Paula?
Next, you're unmuted. You're unmuted. Oh, good. I have a problem with your personas. It doesn't give the whole story. It doesn't give any indication why these people are having problems, why, you know, why is the ramp too steep? Was there not a sidewalk there, a curb there to put the ramp on? I mean, it gives you part of the story, but it doesn't give you the whole story.
Through you, Chair. Yes, that's true. So there will be parts of the story that the participants themselves didn't always have an answer to. So as part of the interviews, we gave them a lot of room to describe their experiences. We asked follow-up questions. Sometimes the participants didn't necessarily have like a full understanding of why certain issues were the case. They would be able to say, for example, that the ride was extremely uncomfortable and quite bumpy, but they weren't sure whether it was because of the particular route that was being taken. Was it because the vehicle itself, the shock absorbers were not great? Was there something else that was at play? And so the root causes are difficult to surfaced only through the interview data and do require some additional thought and some additional investigation to better understand what those issues are, how they're arising, and how they can be resolved.
So how are we going to do that?
That's a great question. So as mentioned, the journey maps are not a standalone. What they do is highlight the pain points, but they don't fully provide resolution to the pain points. So by understanding where the pain points are and where they're coming from and showing what those patterns are in the pain points, it gives the ATS team an opportunity to actually do a further investigation and dig a bit deeper and build collaboratively with the service provider and with the participants, the customers, and with other data sources to figure out what the right solutions would be.
Okay, but we can't do anything about the roads. I mean, doesn't matter whether you're in a car, a darts van, or on the bus. You can't do anything about the road. So, you know, to me, that shouldn't even be part of the persona, because that's something that nobody can do anything about. So. Mark McNeil, anyway, control F6.
You might. Oh,
go on. Sorry.
I hope I'm not interrupting anyone. Yes, certainly not being able to do anything about potholes in the roads, but the vehicles themselves, the routes that are being taken, the shock absorbers in the vehicles, those are things that we can certainly do something about.
They've all been fixed, and Michelle will tell you that. They run fine. So I think we're getting a bit, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there because I can get into a lot more other things, but I'm going to leave it there.
Tomorrow, speaker list.
Thanks, Paula. Okay, next up on the speakers list is Kim or Tim, or both. Come in, Cape or Tim.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not, given that this report has first been revealed to the full ACPD, is it reasonable or possible to have this report referred to the Transportation Working Group where we can maybe have more time and more in-depth discussion about the findings?
I believe Michelle would like to answer that.
Through the chair, that can certainly happen. That can certainly happen, Tim. The personas have been crafted, and we can take, we wanted to bring these to the broader ACPD. We can certainly also bring them for discussion at the Transportation Working Group. I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea because I think I'd like a little bit more time to digest the actual report itself and have a little bit more in-depth conversation, because to me there's some very revealing data here, and I was not fully in support of this kind of exercise, but hearing the outcomes, I think there's room for more discussion and deliberation and what this really means in terms of service.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? So before we go to second time speakers? I have stuff to say, but I'll wait to the end. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment through the chair to Paula. There are leaf springs at the back of those vans. So if you're sitting at the back, you're a cargo. So you do feel it. I've flown up 4 inches off the chair before. Doesn't matter whether it's a pothole or a rough road. So the vehicle of choice is a converted cargo van. The front is not a problem. It's just when you're stuck in the back. And that's it. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Paula.
Space. You're unmuted.
How much was left out of these personas? Who chose what to put in them?
So the personas are an amalgam of various participants. Some of the details of the participants' experiences would not all have fitted within one of the 5 personas. So we are providing to ATS the anonymized full transcripts of the interviews of all 13. So that data will be available in terms of some of the nuances, some of the unique elements of individual experiences. A couple of the considerations that went into developing the personas included making sure that there was anonymity so that none of the participants felt that their journeys were fully reflected. But we also wanted to make sure that we were capturing as much as possible in terms of the detail, in terms of those specific elements. So the presentation that you've seen does strip back a bit of the detail because we needed to fit it in a presentation format, but the report will have more information and more detail in it. And we will have the full transcripts of all of the interviews also with personal identifying information redacted available so that those additional elements can also be part of the data gathering process.
And when do we get to see the full report?
So we're working on that at the moment. The intention is to have it for Michelle's team, and I'll let Michelle maybe answer in terms of the next steps on the reporting process.
Thanks. Yes, through the chair. ATS intends to take the rich data that's in the report, and we'll have to review, especially in terms of, interview transcripts being included and that kind of thing. I know that they are anonymized, but we also have to be aware that we have to take that extra care if we were going to provide the report to the ACPD, and then it would have to be posted to an agenda. So, ATS will be taking the results of the report and using them to inform any plans going forward for an integrated service pilot, any plans going forward for a general review of how service is provided, and also ongoing customer satisfaction work. So we will use it to inform perhaps subjects for focus groups, perhaps the smaller, more targeted surveys, other kinds of customer satisfaction work that the customer panel can do or a smaller survey can do. I hope that answers the question. It's early days for me and I haven't seen it. And I'm also new to the world of customer satisfaction work as a profession. It's not my wheelhouse, but we're quite excited about it.
But I didn't see anything in there, Michelle, about integrated travel. If you're going to use this to be part of your integrated travel, there was nothing in those personas.
So through the chair, the purpose today was to simply provide what the personas are and the experience and pain points that were identified as part of the persona experience for comment from the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities. There were additional questions asked by the interviewers, by the consultant, on thoughts on hopes for fears about integrated transit, integrated travel. And those results will also be included in the report that is provided by Dillon Consulting to Accessible Transportation Services and will inform decisions we make about planning for a pilot.
Thank you.
Other questions? No? Can you take the chair, Paula?
You're unmuted. You're unmuted.
Yes, I take the chair, James.
Okay, I have a number of questions. For one thing, how did you acquire these 13 participants? Was it a call out or people just volunteered?
So through the chair, we looked at the demographic categories that, the consultant was trying to include in order to create some robust personas that speak to a lot of different experiences. And so those were individual calls made by a customer care team at Accessible Transportation Services, also to ensure that we were providing the background and the context so that people understood the reason for the project, and that the results would be anonymous, that there would be no pressure, that this doesn't impact their eligibility for service, all of the concerns that ACPD Accessibility Committee had raised. But that's how it was done. It was done by individual targeted calls.
I'm just concerned because in the participant list is that there's some participants that aren't included. Like I don't see any people with vision loss in particular on that list. I don't see people with very different mobility device experiences. And I'll get to the mobility devices in a moment. So to let me clarify, these 13 people have been boiled down essentially into 5 personas. So the information, you're telling us a story, you're giving us information about those people's experience, but you're mixing different people's experiences together as a single persona, correct?
I'm going to let Zara, as a subject matter expert, speak to that question.
Thank you. So through you, Chair, the way that we bring the personas together is through similar experiences and similar traits. And so we are attempting to see the commonalities in what they tell us around their journey maps that also relate to the way that they travel, that also relate to the disabilities that they have. We did have a couple of participants who have glaucoma and who have low vision. But that being said, it is true that the 13 participants do not represent the full spectrum of different kinds of disabilities that people have in Hamilton, or all of the different kinds of mobility devices that people might be using, or assistive devices that people might be using. And so, as mentioned, there are some limitations to this data gathering approach. There are limitations to the overall kind of use of journey mapping as the be-all end-all of the kind of customer experience that you would be attempting to uncover. So it is a component of data. It's attempting to get a little bit deeper at the pain points and where they're coming from and what's causing them. But fundamentally, it is not fully comprehensive, and to do it fully comprehensively would take a fair bit more time. And we were attempting to do this as something of a pilot or a trial of this methodology to see how much value could be attained through this type of process and what the value would be, and what kind of procedure would be needed in order to undertake this type of research.
Thank you, Zara. My concern is it's disabilities affect everybody differently. People with rare conditions, they all have vastly different experiences, even though they're technically the same disability. And my concern is that in trying to incorporate many different people's experiences into personas, as you've done, we might be missing some important information. One thing I want to speak to is the mobility device list on your report. It is vastly simplified. For example, you only mention that people's walkers are on the list, but in the persona, it says rollator. Well, there's a vast difference between a walker and a rollator and the people's experience in using it. So you need to be clear. You need to be clear on that. The motorized wheelchair, for example, in the image that you provided is actually a power chair, which is also going to be a different experience than a person in a motorized wheelchair, which I believe is more like a power assist with a handlebar. So you need to be very specific when you're telling a story about people when they're going through these different mobility devices, to be very specific about what mobility devices we're talking about.
Thank you very much. That's good feedback. We'll bring that back through and make sure that we're fully aligning with the types of devices that were described through the interviews.
Thank you. And my last question would be vehicle types. You basically specified that everybody's in the same vehicle, but as I understand from DARTS, we're getting a wide variety of different, we have the vans, we have the ProMasters. Is there a way to differentiate their different experiences on different vehicles?
Yes, we do have that data of what type of vehicle each of the participants described using. For some participants, it tended to vary. So there were a range of different types of vehicles that they had experience with ATS or with DARTS. So all of that will be included as part of the report, and we can add that additional detail to the persona descriptions as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that clarifies all my questions. I'll take this right back, Paula. Thank you.
Very sure, sir.
To wrap this up, are there any last questions or comments for Zara or Michelle? I am seeing none. So then may I please have a mover and a seconder to receive, what is it? Oh, I'm on the wrong page, sorry. To receive Michelle's presentation.
Mark.
And for referral to TWG. Mark and Hope. Is there anybody opposed to receiving the presentation and sending it to TWG? Seeing none, motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, Michelle. Thank you very much, Zara. And
Thank you.
The other gentleman, I believe, is here. Consent items. In the interest of time, we're going to hear all the consent items 9.1 to 9.6, with 9.6 being going first, and then receive them together at the end. So 9.6, open spaces and parklands working group update.
Yes, thank you. So the Outdoor Spaces Parklands Working Group met for the first time in a number of months. That said, we focused on two things primarily. One was the outdoor dining, and we agreed essentially that we would continue to have conversation with Christina Geisler from Economic Development around the outdoor dining. The second issue was the report from the McMaster students, which I believe was attached to the agenda package. We had good discussion. There were some concerns about the perhaps incompleteness of the report and the findings of the report in terms of the initial proposed work by the students, but I think it was understood that the students' opportunities to do the breadth of work that was perhaps initially thought to be helpful, the ability to complete that breadth of work was their hands were a bit tied for a number of reasons. But notwithstanding that, the report was well received, and in particular, Megan Stewart, the staff member to the working group, felt that the report had a lot of potential and a lot of good information. That said, Megan thought it would probably be best if we referred the report to staff because of the various kinds of recommendations that are contained within the report, and there are about 60 recommendations. It would probably be good to get feedback and input from staff on whether or not those recommendations may have already been undertaken, B, whether or not they are actually feasible for a variety of reasons, and C, if they are reasonable and acceptable, then how should we proceed with those recommendations? So a recommendation was put forward in the notes, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Carrie, I wonder if it's possible to read what that recommendation is, and then I wonder if we can put forward that as a motion so we can recommend to council that the action be taken, and then we can move forward with that. So is that possible?
Begin Posh. Carrie started sharing content.
Through the chair, Tim, I have the motion on the screen, and I can read it out.
Okay.
That
If you could, that would be, yeah, please, thank you.
Okay, that the report by McMaster students Natasha Kulig and Megan Levine entitled Evidence-Based Practice Project Accessible Parks and Outdoor Spaces in the City of Hamilton, attached to the November 1st, 2024 Open Spaces and Parklands Working Group meeting notes, be received and referred to staff for feedback to the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities on the merits and feasibility for implementation of any or all of the recommendations.
Thank you. So there you have it. I think Kim will second the motion. So if I put that forward, Kim will second the motion.
Well, hang on a second. Do you have a written motion? I'm not
That's what-
really, go ahead.
That's what Carrie just read.
That's a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a reason why this has to be done so quickly?
Well, when else are we going to do it?
When everybody's had a chance to properly read the report and the motion?
Well, I'm going to presume in the same way we deal with every part of business, people have received the report and they've had a chance to read it. I'd like to hear from committee members if they think they haven't had a chance to read it and if they want to defer it. So the report was part of the agenda package. And there's the recommendation. We talked about this at the outdoor spaces and we agreed that we would put it on the agenda for this meeting.
I understand that, but we also have a procedure of putting motions forward and something that people can read. A lot of people don't do very well in audio. It's a motion from the floor on the item on the agenda.
It's not a motion from the floor.
It's okay.
It's in the,
I'm being told that it's
notes.
okay. I would just like to make sure procedure is being followed correctly so that everybody has a chance to participate, but I'm told that this is okay. So we're going to move forward. Okay, so are there any opposed to the motion? I'm seeing none. Motion's carried.
Thank you. So I'd just like to ask if there are two things. If there are any questions with regard to the notes of the meeting. And secondly, now that this will go forward to, I presume, GIC, through you, Mr. Chair, to Carrie, do we have a sense of when it might hit the GIC agenda so that we can be sure to have somebody there to be present to speak to it? And if so, do I need to have a motion to do that?
Delegate.
You would need a motion to delegate on behalf of the committee.
Okay.
And it won't be on the next GIC agenda because the agenda is being published tomorrow. It'll be the subsequent meeting.
Okay. So do you know what tomorrow? So 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks then, correct?
December 4th.
December 4th. Okay. So is it acceptable to put forward then a motion that I and or perhaps even Megan or Natasha, should they be available, can present on behalf of ACPD to GIC on this report and the recommendation?
The report is just a referral to staff. It won't actually be approved by GIC. They'll just receive it for information.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there's a reason for you to delegate.
Okay.
Until it's done.
I guess I'm just concerned that GIC may not know what to do with the report, and other than the fact that it says refer to staff. But is there a chance that they might reject that recommendation?
No, it won't go to them for approval. It just goes to them for information. They don't need to approve your referral to staff.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. So then I guess my second question is if there's anybody from committee who has any questions with regard to the notes of the meeting. Not receiving any, I will consider it done. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much. And I will hand the chair to Paula, I believe, because now it's my turn to do my string.
Thank you, sir. I have the chair.
Okay, built environment. Okay, we met with Andrew and Omo to discuss the complete streets. This was raised by Kara, who wants to look after it. It's very early days in the Barton Street Complete Streets Plan. They're just doing some initial public consultations. They're not at the actual proposal phase yet. But we did describe some of our concerns with current Barton Street issues, curb cut angles, the lack of maintenance, the lack of space for green space, for shading, during the heat island issues. We mentioned the bench issue, and we were curious about urban braille being put in. They weren't quite sure what we meant by urban braille, which means that we should stay on top of this. So Kara's going to look after working with these individuals and hopefully have a report for us when they're ready for the next phase. Then we discussed the bike lane issue. There's a lot of attention with bike lanes with the provincial government, and they want to remove them. This is a problem for a lot of us because a lot of people with disabilities have begun relying on the bike lanes, especially as the networks have started to connect. So they've been quite useful to us. We also discussed some of the issues of calling them bike lanes, as we get a lot of friction from other people, drivers, bike users, who feel that we don't belong in the bike lanes, but they're actually called MMU lanes, multimodality use lanes, or also known as diamond lanes. So a number of vehicles can use them: bikes, e-scooters, skateboarders, rollerbladers, mobility scooters, power chairs, joggers, and so forth. So calling them bike lanes only prioritizes one over the other, and we would like to possibly put in different pictures at random along the lanes. Also, when the Cycling Advisory Committee reforms, we would like to discuss with them about education programs, about sharing the lanes, And the other concern was the maintenance of the bike lanes as they are getting very bad in certain areas. I understand that the cycling committee actually worked on a lot of maintenance upkeep lists, and as they're not meeting right now, that might be one of the issues. So we will discuss that again for next month. And that's it for built. Moving
Thank
on
you,
to,
James.
thank you. So I guess I'll move on to 9.2. We had a good discussion with Deborah Walco and Heather McDonald about transitional housing. Housing has had a difficult time with transitional housing. We seem to be coming at both ends of it, but we didn't know what was in the middle, which was creating a disconnect whenever we try and reach out to staff about what type of housing is considered transitional housing and how the whole system works. So we had these individuals from the Greater Toronto area come from Loft, and they informed us quite a bit about transitional housing in the area. While it's slightly different in Toronto, it gave us a good picture of where to start. The part of the missing piece of the puzzle, as far as we discovered, is the Ontario Health Team, which we haven't been reaching out to them, so that's why we haven't solved the puzzle. So we will reach out to the Ontario Health Team and learn what their part of transitional housing in the Hamilton area is. We also discussed with them residential care facilities and other forms of transitional housing. They consider recreational care facilities, what do they call them? Domiciliary hostels in their area, and their programming is different than ours. So we'll have some interesting discussions on that. The supervised encampment discussion, we discussed the upcoming supervised encampments in the Barton-Tiffany area. In general, or in particular, the fact that there's been no effort to modify any of these units, because there's still a number of people out on the street that are going to be using these units that require modification on a case-by-case basis, which is the whole purpose of the individual shelters, so they could be modified to each person's needs. So we would like to discuss that with staff. So we will have to put forward a letter about encampments. We're also concerned about the encampments being removed from parks, because we know that a lot of people with disabilities are using tents so that they can modify their spaces that's unmodifiable in current shelter space. And that was housing, I believe. And then outreach. Thank you. Let me just find my outreach notes.
Paula,
Yes.
Mark is on the speakers list for the first item.
Sorry.
We want to go back to him.
Oh, okay. Mark, you have a question for James?
No, sorry, I just wanted to state that I was going to be stepping away for 15 minutes, and I was hunting for the chat direct. So thanks anyway.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, James.
All right, outreach, we did a post-event wrap-up for the Accessibility and Accessibility Awards. And so we did what we did last few years. We started with what worked well, which was quite a long list. The layout was good, presentation space was great, the awards was great. I'm not really going to go through this whole list. Advertising went very well. Hope's poster crew was great. They posted posters all over the city, and Mac and Mohawk. Judging rubric worked very well for us. The awards looked great. The safe space tent was a great idea. That worked well. The CDC orthomobility repair station was quite popular. The tactile station was popular. The art show was good, and the photography was phenomenal. So then we went into what happened not so well. We had some issues with the award judging software with submission criteria. We need to tighten that up. Chair wash station, just because it was unmanned or unstaffed, sorry. Hospitality area, because we didn't have a sign for the second year in a row. I forgot to get a sign made for the hospitality area, so hopefully third time's a charm. The setup was kind of a problem because the group that we had, the contractor we had, was confused on the setup. The website had some serious issues this year, but we'll be rebuilding that and fixing that. Nomination response was a bit of a flop. And insurance related to guide dogs. We heard far too late that guide dogs would like to come and do a presentation, but we'd already purchased our insurance and that did not include guide dog related insurance. Sound system and cabling across the path was also a problem, and the event schedule handouts. And then we had the few things that didn't work well at all that need some serious work for next year is social media, invoicing, comms department collaboration, the hearing test station, and that was it. Then we discussed the equipment storage. We're developing quite a collection downstairs in the basement, so I'd like to tidy it up and make sure that we keep all of our stuff in the right areas so that we don't lose things. So we discussed purchasing storage bins, so we'd like to do that. And then we discussed an honorarium. Motion will be coming next month. James Jr. put forth a heck of an effort. He designed the award logo, revised the ACPD logo, designed the T-shirt, and did all the photography. None of this work can go to his portfolio, so we'd like to thank him in some way by an honorarium and a letter of appreciation. So we'll have that ready for next month. And then we began the AF and AA planning for next year. We began by talking about indoor-outdoor. We decided still that outdoor is better because it will fit within our budget better. Paula is going to look into sponsorship programs, though, that might allow us to expand over the next few years. We decided that we weren't going to collaborate with SCI simply because our needs weren't aligned. And we'd like to do a complete revamp of the website. As I mentioned, there was some flaws, basically because we're using a 3-year-old website. It needs to be rebuilt from scratch. So we will start putting forward designs and whatnot to outreach for this month, and ACPD should see it in the next 2 or 3 months for approval so we can get it done early. And we haven't set a date yet because we're still waiting on council and committee schedule to be officially approved. Last thing, we discussed the name change and the final cost for the report to council, which will also be next month. The only thing that we actually had to pay for out of the entire year for the name change was the table runner, replacing the table banner at a cost of $183.10. But because we kept the same initials, that is the only thing we needed to change. So like I said, we'll have that next month. That's it.
Thank you, James. What's next?
You.
Me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, James, you may have the chair.
I take back the chair, 9.4.
Thank you. Okay. Being as nobody's seen the notes from the last TWG, and there is an awful lot of information in them, thanks to Michelle. To start with, the HSR operator trainer, Tyler Davey, came to give us a presentation on how they train new drivers. There are a lot of inconsistencies in what he says they train them to do and what they actually do. So what I would like everybody to do, I will send out to all ACPD because I think everybody should see it. What was said, what they say they do, and what they say, and what we know they don't do. I want everybody's input on this because it's very important that we get this right. And he says they do all this, and we know they don't. They are supposed to, if I read my notes right, which I don't have all my notes because I tipped a cup of tea all over them, is they're supposed to help people to swipe their, he said not, to swipe their Presto card. I believe Michelle said that they are supposed to. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. So I think if everybody reads that, we will be able to move more forward on what they do and what they don't do. Michelle gave a presentation on the same thing as she just did today about the journey mapping. She talked about the survey and how big the survey is and what's going to come, how much is going to come out of it, which is going to be a lot, apparently. The other thing was the panel for people that are refused darts and for anybody who's on the panel who cannot take notes when they are interviewing people, whether they can record the actual interview, as it would be a bit of a downer if, you know, somebody who cannot actually physically write notes could not do that. So Michelle was going to ask Jessica about that. And the other thing was, it's gone right out of my head. Oh, the policies, the policy review. Michelle is going to put together a working plan. And once we have that, we are going to start in January to go through all the policies, the customer-facing policies with ATS. So I will send out, as I say, these notes because I want everybody's input on them. Okay. So that's my spiel for today.
They will be attached on the next agenda, I'm told?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's it. Any questions for Paula? I'm seeing none. Thank you.
Welcome.
I guess I'll relinquish the chair again.
Thank you, sir. I have the chair.
Okay, strategic planning working group update. There is no strategic planning working group update. Would like to invite the new head clerk in the new year to discuss issues that some of the members of the strategic planning working group would like to talk to, but I would like to talk to them at ACPD in full. So that will be in the new year. That's it.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James? No, seeing none.
Okay, then I will take the chair back.
You have the chair, sir.
Thank you. So then may I have a mover and a seconder to receive items 9.1 to 9.5? We've already done 9.6, right? Yeah, 9.1 to 9.5. Mover, Levi, seconded by Jake. Thank you. So Levi and Jake. Is there any opposed to the consent items? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. Next up, we have visitors that just arrived. 11.1, fire services evacuation procedures for people with various disabilities. We have Chief Cunliffe, Deputy Chief Milovanek, and Deputy Chief Rember. And I'm sorry if I just munched somebody's name up. I apologize. Eric, please go ahead.
So we apologize because we weren't advised that we were to do a presentation. We thought we were going to answer questions.
Okay, then I'll give a brief overview then. We wanted to have you down because in houses and apartment buildings, there's various evacuation procedures. I know that, say, at city housing, we have fire lists for people with disabilities to put their names on it. But we have lots of questions about this process. How detailed are these lists? What are you able to accommodate when you come across it? These are moments of high stress, and a lot of people aren't entirely comfortable with leaving. I know it sounds strange, but there's some people that have difficulty in evacuation procedures. How do you deal with those sorts of issues? How do you deal with mobility issues? I know you can't carry down a power chair, but you can't exactly just carry somebody down in a wheelchair and not bring some sort of device for them to sit in at the bottom. These sorts of questions we have. So any information you could have and elaborate on these, that would be great.
So thank you through the chair. So first and foremost, obviously, if there is a fire emergency in an apartment, our first priority is rescue or preservation of life. And so one of the things that we do initially is when crews get on scene, the first thing is to confirm that we have an incident and where that incident is. Crews will make their way to to the fire floor, and they do that via stairs. Once they do that, then they report back on conditions, and based on those conditions, we may upgrade the alarm to get additional resources, just based on what it is. If the alarms are not sounding, we will be sounding the alarms. We'll manually pull the pull station to alert folks. And then we will systematically start on the fire floor, going room to room, A, to locate the fire, and then B, to, depending on what we're finding, if it's a fully involved fire with lots of smoke, we may actually be looking to the apartments on either side that we would be evacuating. So that would be based on the level of mobility of the resident, then we would judge that. It may, in fact, we will be carrying people out, and we will not be taking time to get wheelchairs and things of that nature. Obviously, at that point, preservation of life is what's most important, so we will do what we need to do. We typically will take the individual to the stairwell, we'll go down a couple of floors, get on an elevator, and bring them down to the main lobby. We will do the best we can to accommodate, but quite frankly, we're not looking to set up chair. That's not what we do. In that case, we're in a rescue type situation. We may, depending on the conditions on the fire floor, be telling people to shelter in place, ask them to go out to the balcony or someplace where they're out of harm's way. We will also do the same thing on the floor above and below. Typically, there'll be a shelter in place type situation. To your point, depending on the circumstance or situation, if we have people with mobility issues that are not in direct threat of life that need to be moved, we typically will not be moving them in their wheelchair or mobility device. We would utilize a stair chair that we would get from the paramedic service to take them down, or we would be carrying them down, okay? Or if they are able to have some mobility, we'll be assisting them to floor below the fire, where we would then use the elevator to go the rest of the way. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Well, yeah, it's, see, here's when I'm sure that when you go and you evacuate people, a lot of people, what can I take? Can I grab this? So that sort of, these are the sort of things that we'd like to have a plan in place for. What are people's best, if they know that there's a fire, what should they be preparing at their door? What should they be doing? That sort of thing.
So really good question. So one of the things that we, first and foremost, depending on the incident, we don't necessarily know how long somebody may be out of their unit. So if it's not in the immediate area of danger, certainly if your cell phone medications, things of that nature, you would want to take, so that from a perspective of number of hours, 24 to 48 hours, that you would be able to sustain whatever you need to. We're not looking for you to pack a suitcase or grab a knapsack. It's just the immediate things that you need. Certainly, we have many cases where we have, if it not even in apartment buildings, but in multi-unit residential, where we have a situation where we have some significant damage. We will do everything we can once the situation is under control. If people need medications or glasses or cell phones and things or keys, we will assign firefighters to find out where things are. We'll go back in and get them and bring them out if it's going to be a sustained period that they're not going to be able to get in. I mean, we do everything we can once the incident's under control to try and help people. In some cases, depending on where their residents may be located in the building, we may be able to escort them and let them get it themselves. It's all situational.
Excellent. Okay, before I put it on the floor, I have a couple more questions just to get the discussion going. There are certain people with mental health issues. How do you, I mean, there are certain individuals that are going to be combative when you tell them that they have to leave. They're shut-ins. They don't want to go. Do you have plans in place for this sort of situation?
So again, if it's a life and death situation, we will be doing everything we can to get them out. We have had situations where people refuse, and depending on the circumstance, if it's safe, we'll get the police involved to assist us with that. In terms of, in terms of people in what I would call sort of the non-hot zone or the non-critical areas, if they refuse to leave, we don't force them out. We just make note in terms of that person is staying within that room or that occupancy. That happens all the time. If it's in a situation where we need a building evacuated fully because maybe it's not a fire incident, maybe it's some other type of incident or some other type of hazard, then we would involve the police to assist us with that if it's mandatory.
Thank you. I do know that there's some issues with that, so I was curious. When you have people evacuate, say you do the full building evacuation, I've seen you pulling out buses and stuff from the HSR. There are plans in place for people with disabilities to stay warm and stuff like that as well?
That's standard protocol for the fire department. Anytime we have an incident that we've got multiple people displaced, no matter whether it's summer, winter, whenever, we will notify HSR. They're very good. They will bring typically an articulating bus so that we can have heat for folks or we can have cooling through air conditioning. And then certainly we encourage people to get on to the bus, but not always the case. People like to stay close to the front door because in some cases it's, they just want to get back in as soon as they can. If it becomes a protracted situation, the Hamilton Fire Department also looks after emergency management for the city. And so if that's the case, depending on what would be happening. So for example, when we had the YMCA fire, that was the next phase of operations that we looked after as senior command staff. Once we had the fire relatively under control, the next focus for us is where are we going to put these people. Short term, we had buses, but that then turned into a long term. So then are we able to do something within the building, or are we looking at setting up a separate evac center that we would look to set up for 72 hours? Depending on the size and scope, we'll bring in the Red Cross to assist us. We have a contract with the Red Cross that allows for the setup of an evac center. They assist us with some supplies as well as coordination and administration relative to registration and things of that nature. So we have all those plans in place and we exercise them all the time.
Excellent. Thank you. And the voluntary evacuation list that's apartment buildings keep, how detailed are they, and what would you recommend people have on there for their own personal information?
So from our perspective, when we go to the apartments, we try and get and we have a situation where we have to evacuate people, or the first thing we do is ask for the binder or the book that has a listing of which occupancies the vulnerable folks are in. We don't need to know any of we just need to know these are folks that have got, that have a need, whether it's a physical handicap or whatever, just so that we know that if we in fact have to move people, we may be dealing with people with mobility or whatever issues. And that way that just helps us in terms of whether we're sending one firefighter, multiple firefighters, if we need to have a stair chair, whatever we need to do. So the biggest thing is from a property management and a tenant perspective is make sure that the property manager or the security tenant is maintaining that list in a current state.
Okay, keep up to date. Yeah.
We've had situations where we get to a building, they give us the log, and then when we go to try and enact some of it, we're finding out that it's not really as up to date as it should be. And there's folks that aren't on the list that need to be on the list. And then there's rooms identified that shouldn't be on the list. So that's the biggest piece for us.
That's good information. Thank you. Well, that's the end of my rough questions. I'm sure there's going to be lots of other people now. I'll let have a turn. Paula.
Yes. People with vision loss or no vision, when you come knocking at my door, how do I know you're a fireman? Secondly, if you take me out of that area where I know and you take me downstairs, who's going to stay with me as I can't just wander to a bathroom or such things as that?
So great question. So first and foremost, you'll know it's a firefighter. We'll be calling out will be telling you where a firefighter, if you were to put your arm on the firefighter, you will know the protective clothing. They're all going to be fully geared up. They'll have tools with them. You will clearly know that they're a firefighter.
Speaker list. All on now.
Okay, sorry.
The other thing, so then once if we had to take you down to the lobby area, we will make sure that you're in a safe place. We will not be able to stay with you. We don't have the resources to do that. Hopefully there will be somebody around, whether it be another tenant or somebody from the property management that would be able to assist you if you needed that. Our role in that emergency situation is to get you to a safe place and make sure that you're out of harm's way.
Right, right. We did suggest once upon a time having a card, that you guys had a card that was tactile, that, you know, somebody could, with vision loss, could actually touch, see, you know, feel, to know that you are emergency workers. And I don't think it ever happened, but we suggested that many years ago. Okay, yeah, my grandson is going to be a fireman in Toronto in January, so I guess I'll learn a lot more.
Wish them the best for that. One of the things is that we have to be careful for non-fire type emergencies. A card type thing might work. It's when we're going into heat environments where things will burn or melt, we really don't want them in our pockets.
No. I understand that, but yeah, we did talk about it years and years ago. But okay, thank you very much for your answers.
You're welcome.
Levi.
Thank you. So my question is regarding the identification of the people, and you mentioned specifically mobility folks. I represent a group who's deaf or hard of hearing. In my case, if I'm profound hard of hearing and I can't hear that alarm, is there anything that the fire department or what would you recommend that we should work on? And I'll give you an example. 2012, 2013, I personally walked over because the Paralympics were coming to Hamilton. I went around to every hotel and motel accommodations, and I basically asked them specifically to ask the question if anybody is hard of hearing or deaf, because they should be on a list of, it might be okay for them to get up and actually walk out. So your job is done as soon as that person knows that there is an issue. But it's identifying and letting them know that there is potentially an emergency.
So I guess the answer to the first part of the question is, if the residence or building was equipped with strobes that are attached to the alarm systems, then that would give somebody with a hearing disability the ability to know that the alarms are sounding. If they're not, certainly having those rooms identified along in the book that we typically, or whatever document we get that people have some form of disability that we need to be made aware of, would be very helpful. So that way we could go and physically get to that apartment or that room and ensure that that individual is safe.
Thank you. As far as the strobes, obviously in the middle of the night, that one would not work either. So that's why probably an additional identification of where that location is just something that, yeah, that just as a recommendation for the fire department to keep that in mind.
So that would be something that the property owners, because there's no legislative word that we would be able to go in and enforce to have people to do that. Certainly it would be something that, we can suggest and collectively suggest, and hopefully people would listen to what we say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Paula?
Unmuted. You're unmuted.
If you were evacuated, say, to a recreation center or something, again, for a person with vision loss, that can be very scary, as they won't know where they are, where anything is. Is there any way that you have any people there that when you do that, that would help?
So the answer is yes. So in evacuation centers, there's a number, so the Red Cross are there with a number of volunteers. Then there's folks and staff that are actually staffing the evacuation centers to help provide whatever need folks are looking for. So we know, in fact, when you set up an evacuation center, you have to take the attitude that everybody is displaced and everybody is out of sorts, right? Because they're not in their natural environment. So we have staff there to help people to understand where they are, what potentially is available, and how the folks in the evacuation shelter are going to be able to help them and what they're going to be able to provide them with. So that's part and parcel, because it's not just folks with a disability, it's everybody that is in a situation of unknown and typically very scared.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm seeing nobody else on the speakers list, so I want to thank you for coming out and answering our questions. I've had some questions about these things for a little while, so I'm really glad you guys came and spoke to this issue. Thank you very much for all you do.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the information? Levi, seconded by Paula. Thank you very much for coming. So if there's any opposed? Sorry, should I ask, is there any discussion?
You're unmuted. You're unmuted.
No, but just a question. Do we still have quorum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, well then, so then if there's any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. That was a good discussion. General information, other business. Is there any other business on the agenda? Staff Sergeant here for something. Oh, just, okay, all right. So unless there's any other business people want to mention at the time? I'm seeing none, so then we will move on to adjournment. 5:35, not bad. Mark is, wow, that was quick. Moved by Mark, seconded by Levi. All right, I'll go with Jake. Jake isn't, there we go, I see Jake back there. Is there any opposed to us adjourning?
I don't think so.
I'm seeing none, so thank you very much for coming. It was a good meeting. Have a good night, everybody.